The harmattan winds swept across the streets of Lagos, carrying with them dust and the chill of the dry season. It was one of those evenings when even the wealthiest hurried indoors, away from the biting air. But on a cracked sidewalk near the upscale Ikoyi district, a woman in a faded olive-green uniform sat slumped against a concrete bench. Her body leaned to one side, nearly lifeless, dust clinging to her apron like a second skin. That woman was Amaka. For 3 years, Amaka had worked as a housemaid in the luxurious home of Chief Bayo Adekunle, a tech tycoon, admired by business magazines and feared by employees. His mansion was vast, his schedule ruthless, and his expectations unyielding. To him, Amaka was like the paint on the walls, silent, unnoticed, functional. She mopped floors before dawn, cooked with precision, and lit incense near the stairwell as he liked. But beyond her quiet footsteps, he knew nothing, and never cared to know. When Amaka arrived late one morning, her eyes swollen from crying, her fingers shaking, Chief Bayo barely looked up. "You're no longer needed," he said flatly. "No inquiries, no severance, no goodbye." Amaka didn't argue. She simply nodded and walked away, leaving behind the only safe place she had. What Bayo didn't know was that Amaka had been secretly sleeping in the servant quarters storeroom for weeks. Her mother, back home in Enugu, was ill and needed constant medication. Amaka sent every kobo she earned home. With rising living costs and reduced hours, she could no longer afford rent. So she stayed hidden, working by day, hiding by night. After her dismissal, she had nowhere to go. No money for transport, no friends nearby. That night, she wandered. The shelters were overcrowded. The bus stops were unsafe. Her phone was dead. Exhausted, she sat down by the road, hoping to close her eyes for a few minutes. But the cold had other plans. The next morning, Chief Bayo's driver was late. In a rare fit of impatience, Bayo decided to walk to his 7 a.m. board meeting through the park shortcut near Falomo Bridge. His polished Italian shoes crunched over gravel. Then he saw her. At first, he didn't recognize the figure slumped under the tree. The uniform caught his attention, familiar, faintly olive under a layer of dust. Her arms were folded tightly around herself, her lips parted slightly. He stepped closer. "Amaka," he muttered, his voice uncertain. No response. He knelt, touched her shoulder, and recoiled. Her skin was ice cold. "Amaka," he called, shaking her gently. Nothing. Panic surged. Not the kind born of stock crashes or missed meetings, something older, deeper. He fumbled for his phone and called emergency services, hands trembling. As he waited, he stared at the woman he'd never really seen. Her face looked gaunt, her clothes soaked in morning dew, her breath faint. And suddenly, for the first time, he wondered, what had she been going through? When the ambulance came, Bayo didn't hesitate. He helped lift her into the stretcher, then climbed into the back with her, not as an employer, but as a man finally realizing how blind he'd been. In the white glow of the emergency room, Bayo sat beside Amaka's bed, silent, tense, guilt gnawing at his chest. The doctor's words rang in his ears, another hour out there, and she wouldn't have made it. Amaka lay still, an oxygen mask over her mouth, 4 lines trailing from her arm. For the first time in his life, Bayo Adekunle had no words. He ignored his assistant's texts, missed 2 investor calls, and let the media team handle whatever fires were erupting online. He was here, because he should have been a long time ago. When Amaka finally stirred near midnight, her eyes fluttered weakly. "Am I dead?" she whispered. "No," Bayo said, voice thick. "You're safe now." She turned her face away. "I never stole. I never lied. I was never late until that day." He swallowed. "And I never asked why. That's on me." The next morning, Chief Bayo gathered his staff, drivers, cooks, security guards. He told them the full story. No lies. No PR polish. I dismissed someone without understanding her story, he said. It almost cost her life. His staff looked stunned. One woman covered her mouth. A gardener cried. Then, the unthinkable happened. Bayo apologized. News spread quickly. A jogger's photo of Amaka on the roadside bench went viral. The public was outraged. How could a billionaire allow such suffering right beneath his roof? Reporters waited outside the hospital. Bayo made no statement. Only this: there's work to do. I'm starting now. When Amaka was discharged, a black SUV waited, not to take her back to labor, but to safety. Bayo stood by it, holding a thick coat and head wrap. This isn't charity, he said gently. It's restoration. She hesitated, pride wounded. Her hand lingered just above the car door handle, trembling slightly. For years, Amaka had endured life's sharpest edges with quiet dignity, always standing tall, even when bent by struggle. To accept help now, from the very man who had cast her aside without a second glance, felt like betrayal to her spirit. But she also knew this wasn't about pride anymore. The hospital bill alone would have buried her under a mountain of debt she could never climb out of. Come to the guest wing, Bayo said again, voice gentler this time, as if speaking not to a former employee but to a person he finally saw. Just to rest. No expectations. No conditions. We'll talk later, about what you want. Not what I expect. There was a long pause. Her eyes filled, though no tears fell. Then she nodded, once, firmly. A quiet surrender. Not to weakness, but to possibility. She agreed, reluctantly. Days became weeks. Amaka stayed in a warm, sunlit guest room with linen sheets and silence that healed. The room overlooked the garden she used to sweep. Now, she watched the hibiscus flowers bloom from behind glass, no longer through a haze of exhaustion. A private doctor came twice a week. A therapist visited once. Bayo made all the arrangements without asking for recognition. He simply did what should have been done long ago. But perhaps the greatest gift came quietly, a plane ticket for her mother and younger brother, flown in from Enugu under the radar. When they arrived, Amaka wept openly for the first time in years. They were placed in a comfortable flat in Lekki, the lease signed in their name. For once, her family didn't have to choose between medicine and food. And every evening, without fail, Bayo came by. Not in suits. Not with an air of superiority. He often wore plain shirts and brought nothing but time. He didn't speak much. He listened, and slowly, Amaka began to talk. She told him about growing up in a dusty one-room compound, how she would sneak books out of the local library because she loved stories too much to return them on time. She told him how, when her father died, she gave up university dreams to raise her brother and tend to her mother. How she came to Lagos hoping for a better life, and how working in his house had been her last chance to hold it all together. For the first time, her story was not invisible. And for the first time, Bayo didn't feel like a man in control. He felt like a student, humbled before a teacher he had once dismissed. One afternoon, as the golden light of the Harmattan sun streamed through the sitting room, Bayo made a quiet offer. "I want you to come back," he said. She stiffened. "Not as a maid," he added quickly. "As director of staff welfare. I've got homes in 4 cities. Dozens of employees. You'll oversee everything, their well-being, their housing, their needs. You'll have full authority. Your job will be to make sure no one ever slips through the cracks again, like you did." Amaka blinked, stunned. She looked at him as if trying to decipher whether this was guilt, pity, or sincerity. But what she saw was something different. "Director?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You trust me with that?" Bayo didn't flinch. "I've never trusted anyone more. A long silence passed between them. And then, a slow nod. This time not reluctant, but full of quiet power. Months later, the grand ballroom of Bayo's Banana Island mansion glittered under crystal chandeliers. Lagos society elites filled the space, politicians, celebrities, CEOs, all gathered for an exclusive charity gala. The air was thick with perfume, expensive wine, and whispered judgments. Bayo stepped up to the microphone. "I used to think power was in stock portfolios and skyscrapers," he began, voice steady. "But I was wrong. True power is surviving quietly when the world doesn't see you, and showing up again the next day anyway." He paused. The room hushed. "There was a woman in my household for years who did just that. I barely saw her, not truly. I thought she worked for me, but really, I was learning from her all along." He turned slightly and gestured toward the stage. "Please welcome the woman who changed everything. Ms. Amaka Ease." Gasps rose. Heads turned. And slowly, people stood. Amaka walked onto the stage in a deep green Ankara-inspired dress, tailored elegantly. Her hair was braided neatly, and confidence flowed through her like sunlight. This was not the maid they ignored. This was a woman transformed, and a woman who had, in turn, transformed them all. The applause began softly, then surged into a full standing ovation. Not from pity. From awe. Because Amaka had once been a shadow in the halls. Now, she stood in the spotlight, not as a survivor, but as a leader. And the man who once dismissed her. He finally understood that redemption isn't found in wealth. It's found in seeing the people we overlook, and choosing to do better.